Gorilla Walk by Ted and Betsy Lewin. Introduction. In 1905, a German army officer named Oscar van Beringen decided to climb Mount Sabinio in Africa's Virunga Range, hoping to impress the local chiefs and other colonial powers with German military might. While camped on a steep ridge, he encountered and shot two large man-like apes, one of which he brought back. Van Berengen's specimen was the first mountain gorilla ever seen by Western scientists. Though mountain gorillas probably never existed in huge numbers, today fewer than 900 remain in the world. There are three species of gorillas: the eastern lowland, found in the rainforest of Congo; the western lowland, found in western Africa; and the mountain gorilla, found only in the Virunga Range of Rwanda, the Congo, and the tiny impenetrable forest of Uganda. Because mountain gorillas live at higher altitudes, they are the bulkiest and have the longest, thickest coats. The relationships between mountain gorillas and humans has been tragic. Gorillas' heads are valued as trophies. Their hands are made into ashtrays. Adult gorillas will fiercely defend their young, so the adults are often killed by poachers, stealing the babies for illegal trade in endangered animals. Gorillas are maimed by poachers. Snares intended for other forest creatures in their habitat has been exploited for logging, mining, and agriculture. In the 20 years after Van Berengen's discovery of the mountain gorilla, at least 50 were killed or captured in the Virungas. To protect them, in 1925, the Belgian colonial government of what is now Rwanda created Africa's first national park, the Albert National Park. By the 1950s, George Schaller, the first person to study mountain gorillas in the wild, estimated a population of 450. By 1980, the population had dropped to 250. The park has been split, the middle section given away, and almost half the gorilla habitat has been turned over to agriculture. Civil war and poaching almost accounted for many deaths. The mountain gorillas in Uganda have fared somewhat better. In 1932, the area of Bwindi was set aside as impenetrable forest reserve, which became Bwindi National Park in 1991, and is now called Bwindi Impenetrable National Park. The park lies entirely within the country of Uganda and is small and carefully managed. In the local language, Bwindi means muddy, swampy place full of darkness. It is one of the few forests in the world to have survived the Pleistocene era, the time of the glaciers, and is well over 25,000 years old. It is home to some species of animals, birds, butterflies, and trees that can be found nowhere else on Earth, and today is the home to 400 mountain gorillas, almost half the world's population. Of these three groups, totaling about 30 individuals, have been habituated, made comfortable in the presence of humans, and can be visited by tourists. Habituating mountain gorillas takes up to 2 years and is not an easy process for either the Ugandan trackers who do it or for the gorillas. The trackers begin by following a specific group of wild gorillas daily. As they draw closer, the gorillas will either charge or run away at first, but gradually the trackers are able to shorten the distance between them and the gorillas. This takes both patience and courage, for even when faced with a charging gorilla, the trackers must remain calm, making the belching sounds of the gorillas to reassure them. The process must be very stressful for both gorillas and the trackers at first, but over time the gorillas accept the presence of humans and behave quite normally. Habituation is, however, not yet complete, for although the gorillas are now habituated to Africans, they are not yet habituated to white people. So white volunteers are recruited to accompany the African trackers, and the process begins again. Despite the difficulty of habituation, it has become critical to saving the mountain gorilla. Because of its wild gorillas can be visited by tourists, which brings in a lot of green foreign revenue, making the mountain gorilla both an important natural resource and a source of national pride. The first gorilla ecotourism, started in Rwanda in 1978, was a huge success both financially and for the gorillas, whose population has increased over time to 400 animals. On the downside, habituation exposes the mountain gorilla to human diseases that could prove fatal. To reduce the risk of infection, visitors with permits are restricted to 6 per group and are allowed to spend only 1 hour with the gorillas. A minimum distance of 15 feet must be maintained because gorillas have no immunity to childhood diseases. No one under the age of 15 is allowed to visit, nor are tourists showing any signs of sickness. Habituated gorillas are also much more vulnerable to poachers, who in 1995 killed 7. 4 of them were speared to death while trying to protect an infant. The infant was taken and is presumed dead as well. Interestingly, habituated gorillas are shunned by other gorillas. No one knows why, but in light of the risk of habituation, it makes sense. Despite these problems, ecotourism seems the only way gorillas can be saved. As long as it generates revenue and jobs, it provides a strong incentive for the surrounding community to protect mountain gorillas and their habitat. When you're going to visit the mountain gorillas, Ugandans say, you're going to see those people in the forest. When we were kids, the only mountain gorillas we saw were pictures of dead ones, their huge arms tied spread eagle between the 2 trees, a pygmy posing dutifully beside them, spear in hand. Both of us dreamed of someday seeing these magnificent animals alive and free. But of course that wasn't even possible until the late 1970s, when the business of ecotourism began. The civil wars and political chaos in the area forced us to postpone our journey several times. But finally, in November 1997, we are in southern Uganda and on our way to meet the mountain gorilla. After landing at Entebbe Airport, we spent the night in Kampala. Now we're bumping along on a muddy, rutted road in Kobe. We've been traveling for 9 hours and are still 3 hours for Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, with no sign of forest yet in sight, just endless terraced hillsides rolling back from the road. As dark overtakes us, the green hills, now black, are shrouded with mist. The lights of a town in the valley below us look like fallen stars. Finally, ahead of us, we see the gate of the national park. Just beyond, the lanterns have been set out like beacons on the front porches of the guest cottages, tiny cell-like rooms with corrugated tin roofs. Once inside our cottage, we ready our cameras, gear for the morning, then flopped into bed exhausted. It's pitch black except for the warm glow from the lantern on our porch. K group. At first light, we step out onto the porch. Directly in front of us, the steep forested slopes of Bwindi rise into the morning mist. By 8:30, we've picked up our gorilla permits, $150 each per day. We're going to visit K Group, a small family of 4 silverback. Only adult male gorillas have this distinctive marking, a juvenile and a female with a 2-week-old baby. We're told we'll be back by noon, so in addition to our rain gear, 2 cameras, 20 rolls of film, pocket tape recorders, journals, binoculars, sandwiches, hard-boiled eggs, and fruit, we've packed enough water for a 3 to 4 hour trek, a liter apiece. We each select a stout walking stick from a bunch of leaning against the wall of the park office banda, or hut, then pile into a small pickup truck. We're started tracking on the other side of the park, accompanied by 2 trackers, a ranger, guide, and 1 porter, each to carry our gear. A half-hour later, we leave the truck, past 2 guards armed with machine guns at the trailhead, and start down a muddy, well-traveled path, passing thatched hut homesteads and neat fields of sorghum, potatoes, bananas, corn, elephant grass, and tea. A lone tea picker barely takes notice of us. We climb up the terraced slopes. Behind us, we look down on a cultivated fields that stretch all the way to Lake Edward and the distant Ruwenzori Mountains. In front of us, a wall of 150-foot high trees mark the beginnings of the impenetrable forest. The trackers hack the ways into the dense gloom, and we begin to climb steep slopes, slipping on the muddy, rotting vegetations beneath our feet. Huge trees look strangled with vines. Giant tree and ferns are everywhere, their trunks girdled with needle-sharp thorns. Long rope-like vines with thorns curved like cat claws snatch at our ankles. We stumble and grab for handholds, but get handfuls of thorns instead. Our hands and arms begin to look as if we've been in a cat fight. After climbing for 2 hours, we are soaked with sweat. So far, no gorillas. We slip and slide down 60-degree slopes through moss-covered trees to an escarpment. 40 feet below, a jungle stream rushes along. K Group has somehow gotten down there and crossed to the other side, but it's too steep for us. We move along the edge, our glasses fogged, sweat pouring into our eyes and soaking our shirts. We pause to drink deeply from our water bottles. At this rate, we'll be out of water soon. Covered with mud and slime, we slide on our backs down a very steep slope to the edge of the stream, then cross it on slippery moss-covered rocks, using our walking sticks for balance. On the opposite bank is a solid wall of vegetation and thorny tree ferns. The trackers hack and slice their way up the slope, lose the trail, backtrack to start up another way. We follow 3 difficult steps. Up, our boots barely gripping, we slide back down on our stomachs in the mud. It's 1 o'clock, and the heat and humidity are dreadful. We drink the last of our water, then start up again. Caked with mud, our hearts pounding from exertion, our faces sucked in from dehydration, our hair matted down with sweat. Ahead, the trackers hack away like machines, their green uniforms still smart and dry. After 5 hours, we find gorilla tracks from yesterday, broken branches and fresh dung. The trackers whistle softly, almost inaudibly, to locate each other in the thick underbrush. 1 step at a time, our walking sticks jabbing the mud, we head down yet another slippery slope to the bottom of the ravine. Here, there's a stream so wide it creates a break in the forest canopy. Sudden sunlight pours in, glistening on the coppery water that rushes over mossy rocks. We take off our steamed-up glasses, wipe the sweat from our faces, and catch our breath, then cross the stream with helping hands from our porters. We come to a mucky, ankle-deep swamp. Twisted roots grab at our feet as we cross it, then up another steep slope. 1 step, 1 gasp for air at a time. We hear the slice and slash of the trackers' machetes ahead. They've hacked a tunnel just big enough to crawl through. Thorns and nettles tear at us. Ahead, a giant fallen fig tree makes a 100-foot-long, rotting, moss-covered bridge up the forest slope. 1 false step and it's straight down through the thorns and rocks to the ravine hundreds of feet below. A porter offers a steadying hand. "Don't fall," he warns. Atop the slope, the forest canopy opens up, and we can see the sky again for a bit as we head down the other side. We've been out of water for nearly 3 hours now. We can't swallow, and our mouths are full of cotton. Suddenly, our guide yells, "Safari ants, run!" Hundreds of thousands of ants march in a narrow column, flanked by half-inch-long soldier ants whose huge mandibles curve backward at the tips like fishhooks. Their bite is like the sting of a wasp, we're told. "Hurry! Hurry! Run!" yells our guide. The ants seem to be the only thing he's afraid of. We run as fast as we can, crunching hundreds underfoot. When we're well past the colony, we stop and check our clothing for any hitchhikers. We descend into a clearing fringed by tall trees and thick with Bryotaceae, the dense broadleaf bushes that are one of the gorilla's favorite foods. We've been trekking now for 7 hours. We're soaked with sweat, smeared with mud, stained with moss, scratched and bleeding, unable to swallow in our thirst. Our breath, out of breath, without hope ever seen a mountain gorilla. The trackers, still fresh and clean, look at us and smile, then point with their machetes to a movement in the middle of the bushes. "There," one whispers, "the gorillas are just there." They hack their way through the thicket to within 15 feet of the silverback. Now we can smell his pungent, horsey scent and see the big black knob on his head. Slowly pulling back the tangled vegetation like a curtain, the trackers make sounds to assure the silverback. And then, there he is, his gentle 450-pound giant who moves through this thicket with such ease. Our thirst and fatigue are forgotten. Our trackers helped habituate this group and know them well. This one they have named Kakupira, which means lame one. His left hand is crippled from a fight with 2 other big males who ganged up on him in an attempt to take over his group. He was able to fight them off, but because he's handicapped now, the next time they may drive him away or even kill him. If they succeed, one of them will assume leadership, kill the baby, and start his own family. There can be only one leader, so the other male gorilla may stay with the group as a subdominant male or leave to try to attract females and start his own group. Our silverback is delicately plucking the Bryotaceae, peeling back the stems into curling tendrils and stuffing them, and the leaves into his mouth. Our tracker makes sounds. Kakupira looks over his shoulder at us, passes gas, and continues to eat, then stops and seems to go into a reverie. Kapura rolls over onto his prodigious belly, rests his chin on the back of his folded hands, and stares directly at us from only 10 feet away. He doesn't seem to really notice us, though it's more as if he's staring right through us. There, in a movement in the vegetation a few yards away, is Kasagazi, a boy, the young male of K Group. Somewhere hidden nearby is Nayabutono, small lady, and her 2-week-old baby, Magoba, the prophet. Before we know it, our hour is up. Our trackers continue to talk to their old friend as we back away. We try to walk on the twisted root structure of the Bryotaceae, but fall through up to our thighs. Thorns prick our legs and even through our pants. Hacking our way to the edge of the forest, we start back up the slope for home. We have to be out of the forest by 6 o'clock, and it's already 5:15. The sun will set soon. After only an hour of hard climbing, we step out into a farmer's field. Had we known this morning where the gorillas would be found, we could have entered the forest from here and saved ourselves 6 hours of rugged tracking. And cold cattle stand amid the banana trees and stare at us, their huge horns curving gracefully over the heads like misplaced elephant tusk. A long ridge flanked by a terraced slopes descends into the valley. It's nearly dark now. 6:30, and white plumes of smoke from cooking fire dots the landscape. The road is still miles away as we start down the steep slant. Bony, weary, in darkness so total we can't see the porters in front of us. Each footstep is an act of faith. As the slope becomes more gentle, shadowy figures pass us on their way home from the fields, and smell the wood smoke fills the air. An hour down, bottles of water are suddenly thrust at us out of the darkness. A ranger has come up from the road to meet us. We had almost forgotten our thirst, but we drained the bottles quickly. Still wet with sweat, we feel the chill of the night air. Ahead now, we see pink pinpricks of light. The headlights of our truck. We walk into their glare and sink into our seats, exhausted. We've been tracking for almost 11 hours. We're worn out. We're shivering with cold. We've never been happier. M Group. At 8:30 the next morning, we are walking down the rough road that bisects the park. Before long, we step onto a path cut into the thick vegetation at the side of the road and begin our trek. We're ready for it. Today, we're going to visit M Group, a group of 16 family members. After only 3 hours of chopping and slicing our way up the slope, we found M Group's night nest, about a dozen flat, trampoline-like structures. Bouncy underfoot, forest foragers, mountain gorillas do not make permanent homes. Each gorilla makes its own nest every night, wherever the group happens to be at nightfall. Infants sleep with their mothers. We sit on the nest and look out at what the gorillas saw last night just before they dozed off. In front of us are 3 huge trees arching at the top and hung with moss-covered vines. Through the graceful arch of the trees, the impenetrable forest rolls off, seemingly without end. We feel out of our own time. This view, it seems to us, is of the world first made. 100 yards up the slope, we find M Group. Leaving our porters, we move quickly behind the tractors, come to a sunlit patch of brightacea, and stop, ankle deep in a stream. The trackers wait, listen, then point directly ahead. Through the leafy cover, we see part of the huge back and shoulders of the silverback. He is eating. Then he turns to look at us, and all we see are his eyes, hooded by his beetle brow. Say the trackers. We can hear the others feeding all around us, breaking stems and branches. The trackers pull back the vegetation. Now in full view, the silverback Ruhundiza, the one who sleeps a lot, is resting on one elbow. Kawir, small baby, a 3-month-old, plays at his feet. Ruhundiza, the father of all the young in the group, is a tolerant papa. Kawir scampers up the great bulk of his father, then rolls off head over heels. Ruhuzinza lies back on the tangled vegetation and dozes, ignoring Kawir as the baby climbs on him again and again. Kawir's mother, Bukuma, lame-fingered, sits nearby, peeling the bark from a stem. She holds the peeled stem to her mouth as if playing a flute. Kawir, tiring of his game, joins her and watches bright-eyed. They both move nearer to the Ruhudinza, feeding all the while. Bukuma was a big round belly, as do they all. Gorillas' single-chambered digestive systems are not efficient for digesting vegetation, so they have to consume huge amounts daily. An adult male consumes more than 40 pounds, spending about 7 hours a day on concentrated feeding. This gives the gorillas their bloated appearance. It also causes them to pass gas frequently. The rest of the day is spent moving, foraging, resting. Gorillas sleep about 9 hours a night. Kawir stops feeding and crosses his arms. He looks like a little boy daydreaming. Bakuma begins to groom him. He holds very still, seeming to enjoy it immensely. Ruhudiza sits up half-heartedly, eats a leaf or two, then lies down on his side. Bakuma goes to him and lies down facing him. Their faces only inches apart, they gaze into each other's eyes. It's such a tender, intimate moment. We turn our own eyes away. Kawir joins them and snuggles into his mother's back. A juvenile Bob stands up and scampers sideways across the clearing, beating his chest with the cupped palms of his hands. He is showing off, imitating his father, but when a silverback beats his chest, it is much more complicated. 9-step ritual that only an adult completes. He starts by hooting, then delicately places a leaf in his mouth, stands up, beats his chest, kicks out, runs sideways, tears up vegetation, then drops to all fours, and finally slaps the ground. Silverbacks do this to intimidate opponents and to assert authority. Bob sits down about 6 feet away from us and stuffs leaves into his mouth. A female, partially hidden from us, sits up in a tree, breaking branches as if to build a nest. The rest of the group is spread out and can only be heard snapping branches and loudly passing wind. Our time is now, and we begin to back away. As we do, Ruhudiza rolls up onto all fours and strides off into the dense thicket. Kawir pulls himself onto Bakuma's back, and she and the rest of the group all follow Ruhudiza. Still standing in the stream, we are suddenly alone. In this dense patch of Briotaceae, surrounded by impenetrable forest in the heart of Africa, those people in the forest have left us behind. Mountain gorilla facts. When the last individual of a race of living things breaks no more, another heaven and another earth must pass before such one can be again. William Beebe, first curator of birds, Bronx Zoo. Weight, males 300 to 450 pounds, females 150 to 250 pounds. Height, 55 to 73 inches, females up to 60 inches. Diet, leaves, fruits, shoots, stems, flowers, bark, grub, insects, especially ants, ferns. Gestation period, 8.5 months. Estimated lifespan, up to 50 years in the wild. There are no mountain gorillas in captivity. Predators, humans, leopards. There are no longer any leopards in Burundi. Conservation status, endangered. Gorillas are the most terrestrial of the great apes, spending over 90% of their time on the ground. They move quadrupedally on all fours, walking on their knuckles, but can stand upright for short periods of time, particularly to reach food, plants, or as part of chest-beating sequence. Life cycle. Female gorillas reach sexual maturity at around the age of 8, but usually don't have their first offspring until at least the age of 10. Gorilla pregnancies last 8.5 months, but are difficult to observe since gorillas' stomachs are always distended with food. Twins have been born to gorillas, but are extremely rare. Newborns have light brown skin and are highly dependent on their mothers. At first, they cling to the mother's chest, but slowly begin to spend more time on her back as they mature. During the second year, they become more independent and begin playing with others, interacting with the silverback and feeding themselves. Infant, 0 to 3 years, a small animal carried by a female for a long periods and weighing less than 60 pounds. Juvenile, 3 to 6 years, a small animal not carried by a female and weighing 60 to 120 pounds. Sub-adult female, 6 to 8 years, a female weighing 120 to 150 pounds, but not muscular like a blackback male, and lacking a sagittal crest. Adult female, 8 years and older, a female that carries an infant for prolonged periods and weighs 150 to 250 pounds. Subadult male, 6 to 8 years, a male weighing 120 to 150 pounds. Blackback, 8 to 12 years old, a male weighing 150 to 250 pounds with few or no gray hairs on his back. Young silverback, 12 to 15 years old, a male weighing 250 to 300 pounds, muscular like an adult silverback, and with a prominent sagittal crest, but smaller than a silverback. The hairs on the back begin to turn silver during this period. Silverback, 15 years or older, a very large male gorilla weighing 300 to 450 pounds with a prominent sagittal crest and a gray or silver back. Communication. Gorillas communicate using a wide variety of vocalization gestures and facial expressions. 16 distinct vocal signals have been identified. Adult males, particularly the lead silverback, dominate a group's vocalization, and some calls are exclusively male and are often used in confrontations. Non-vocal communications include bared teeth, a stiff-legged walk, lunges, and charges to signal various levels of aggression. These are often combined with vocal cues, as in the classic chest beating sequence performed by adult males to intimate opponents. The male hoots, symbolically feeds and stands up, beats his chest, kicks out, runs sideways, stares up the vegetation, then drops to all four, and finally slaps the ground. At home, we talk of nothing but gorillas. As I fall asleep, I make gorilla vocalizations, and when I am asleep, I dream of gorillas. Richard McGee's Ranger Guide, Bowindi Impenetrable National Park. To Dr. George Scholar, whose wonderful book first brought mountain gorillas into our lives. Special thanks to James Doherty, Curator of Mammals, Wildlife Conservation Society. In 1997, the year we visited Uganda, the census confirmed a population of 300 mountain gorillas in Bowindi Impenetrable National Park. In 2011, the census confirmed a population of 400 mountain gorillas, which brought the total worldwide population up to 880.